Hello, everybody. This is Joe Bullis, your MELS 601 clinical coach. This webinar was originally scheduled to be live on Wednesday, October the 17th at 7:30 p.m. But my father has been admitted to the hospital, and I need to go be with him so we can determine what we want to do and what's going on with him and get him better. So knowing that I wouldn't be able to do the live session of the webinar, I decided to do this recording. I'm going to go over the same information that I had planned to go over with you for our Zoom session on October the 17th. So, and send this out to you via email. So once you have a chance to look at this, please email me with any questions. If you need a private Zoom session or your peer group needs a Zoom session, just contact me and we'll schedule that to kind of go over this information again if we need to, or just to answer your questions. I do apologize for any inconvenience that this may have caused to you, but still getting you the same information. It's just not live, and don't have the ability to ask real-time questions and get real-time answers. But we can address that, and like I said, in another Zoom session or via email. So I hope this is helpful for you, and try to go over in some detail on what I was going to go over in our live session. And so hopefully you'll find it helpful, and it'll may clear up some things that need to be cleared up. And talk with Dr. Church, and from my own experience and looking at my clinical internship Blackboard, I know that you guys are moving through the task and getting ready to approach the end of the semester with some of the things that you need to do outside and outside of Blackboard, inside TaskStream. So plan on going over that and hopefully clearing that up and getting you in good shape so you can begin that. And if you haven't already done that, as you begin to finish task 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the APSL, actually we're getting ready to talk about it, but task 5 will help you as you complete some of the things in TaskStream. So let's talk about that in more detail. The first thing I do want to go over with you, though, is a few of you have gotten into the habit in your APSL task is you will upload task 1 in your review. But apparently you're working real hard, and I appreciate that, and I commend you on that effort, because as soon as you upload task 1, it appears as if you go straight to task 2 and upload task 2, or right after you upload task 2, you upload task 3, maybe within a few hours or a few minutes of each other. And like I said, I appreciate that effort, and that's really good. I'm glad you got those documents in a draft version, and you're ready to move forward. But I would ask you not to upload one task before you get feedback on the previous task. So just for example, let's say that you've completed task 1, rough draft, and you completed task 2, rough draft, and you may have already even gotten peer reviews on both of those tasks. What I would ask you to do is upload task 1, wait and get feedback from me, see what those revisions are, do those revisions, submit it back to me for review, for a final review, before we put it into the evaluation Dropbox. And then once you've finished task 1, then move to task 2 and submit task 2 for review. Even though you may have it sitting there in the saved portion of your computer, don't submit those simultaneously or at the same time. Wait till you get review and feedback from one task and do your revisions for that task before you submit a following task. And the reason I say that is, a lot of, as you know, these tasks are connected as you complete the whole APSL. So you may be getting some feedback on task 1 that you will need to revise part of your task 1, and in doing so, that may mean that you need to revise task 2 as well. So the feedback that you get from task 1 that may cause revisions may also cause revisions in task 2. So to kind of save a little bit of time there. Wait till you get everything done with task 1, and have given you the go ahead to submit to the Dropbox. Get it polished and ready to go to the Dropbox before you submit task 2, and so on and so forth. Let's just keep that in that order and within that timeline, if you will, because that way we'll make sure that we use our time wisely as far as not going back and revising something that you've already submitted, which could have been done as you finished up your task 1. If you have any questions about what I'm asking, just contact me and let me know. But the main thing is to get task 1 done, get feedback on it, revise it, send it to Dropbox, and then if you got task 2 or whatever other task ready to review, submit that. Submit task 2 for review, get feedback, revise, grade, then submit task 3 for review, and do it in that order and kind of within that time frame. I think that'll be less confusing and easier on all of us. All right, so speaking of the task, let's talk about task 5. And I am going to pull up the scale handbook here. And task 5 is really a reflection. Unless Dr. Church has told you something different, you do not need to submit task 5 for peer review. You just complete task 5, and then you go ahead and send it to me via Blackboard. Now, let me kind of preface that with do what Dr. Church tells you to do. If he wants you to submit task 5 to him for approval before you submit it to your clinical internship Blackboard shell, that's cool. You do what he tells you to do. But based on my knowledge, you don't have to do a peer review, but you still may have to send it to him before you send it to me in the internship Blackboard. So just double check with him or look at your syllabus or any communications that he's had with you about what to do there. But getting back in task 5 is a reflection of all the leadership competencies that you engaged in the completion of the APSL. And task 1 and task 2 and task 3 and task 4, as far as getting communications to set up the PLC, picking your PLC, doing the needs assessment, identifying gaps, doing research on best practices that will address those gaps, and coming together to form an action plan based on all the work that you did previous to that. You engaged several leadership competencies in completing those 4 tasks. And task 5 is just a matter of you looking at those each leadership competencies individually and saying, okay, this is what I did, and moving through and completing the APSL. This is the leadership competency I engaged, and this is how I engaged it. So you think about your course content, you think about the conversations that you had with Dr. Church, the readings that you've done, how you utilized all that information as you've gone through in real time, completing the APSL at your school. So you look at each of those competencies and you write a short reflection on how you demonstrated or shown evidence of that leadership competency. So that's task 5. Once you show all the competencies in task 5 in narrative form in a professional written document, do what Dr. Church wants you to do. But once you've completed everything that Dr. Church wants you to complete for task 5, then you send it to me. This is the final piece of the APSL. You send it to me in the Blackboard internship shell for grading. Then, after you get the grade for task 5, you now have the complete APSL. Now, you may have it segmented, task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4, and task 5, but then you take that and you put that into one flowing document, and you take that one flowing document, I'm going to go back over to the Blackboard shell. You take that one flowing document of the APSL, you've submitted and got grades for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Once you submit finally for 5 and get that grade, Then you take those segmented pieces and you put them into one flowing document and you submit that to this section right here, which is the turn it in section of your final evidence of the APSL in one complete document. And then you'll get a grade on that. Once you get a grade on that, you're ready to go to task stream. So now let's talk about some of the things that we want to be doing in task stream after you finish the APSL. I'm going to move over to my task stream documentation, or excuse me, web page here. So, okay, let's say I've done task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4, task 5. Task 5 being a reflection of all my leadership competencies. I've done all that, put all that into one document, put it in the submitted it under the final evidence narrative in Blackboard shell. That would just turn it in, got a grade on that, and I am ready to submit to task stream. So one of the things I want to show you in task stream, and I think I've showed this to you before, but it's going to look something similar to this. You're going to pull up this part of task stream where you submit documentation. Now, you are in MELS 601, and in MELS 601, you have to do four things. 4 things in task stream, 3 of which are on a page similar to this for MELS 601. First, you take that APSL, the completed one flowing document from the APSL, and you submit it here to be evaluated. Now, this is for licensure. Everything you've done up to this point in Dr. Church's class, in the internship shell, that is all to satisfy graduation and getting your diploma through Gardner-Webb. What you're doing here in task stream is going to be what you get your licensure in, or how you get your licensure for the state of North Carolina. So you submit the APSL here for evaluation. Now, you can already work on these other 2 things. We told you to kind of hold off on it because we wanted you to get a good handle on the APSL. Some of you have already done the School of Ed dispositions, and that's fine. And you can really work on these 2 things anytime that you want to. But you, being in 601, it was really good that you concentrated on the APSL first before you worried about task stream. So you submit your APSL for evaluation. Next, you come here and you address the competency analysis. The competency analysis is you are doing a self-assessment and analyzing yourself on each of the 21st North Carolina School Executive Competencies standards. Those 21 things that North Carolina says a principal must possess in order to hold license for the state of North Carolina in the way of school administration. Those competencies, see if I'm going to click on that. I'm going to pull that form up, and it's going to look something like this. And you're going to assess yourself on each of these competencies. Change, and you'll see these again in a minute, but change management, creative thinking, results orientation, environmental awareness, so on and so forth. So you look at each competency, and this is what you address in task 5. So task 5, where you reflect on those leadership competencies, these are your subheadings right here. You need to reflect on change management and how you utilize that leadership competency in some of the tasks in APSL, and any task in APSL, tasks 1 through 4, how did you engage the leadership competency of change management? So you will say, did I meet it, and didn't I meet that? And then you show evidence here of how you met that competency. So what are you going to put inside this box? What you put inside this box will be what you wrote in task 5. So you're not recreating the wheel, or you're not having to do anything else. You just go to task 5, look up change management. What did you write in task 5 about change management? Copy and paste it right here. And this is your first self-assessment in your competency analysis. You won't do this again until 6:05. So you may not meet some of these, and that's okay. There's some specific ones that you really should address at this point in time, and I'll show you. I'll share with you in a minute what those are. So you may not have shown evidence of each of those competencies in just completing the APSL. But by the end of the program, by 6:05, you will have shown competency several different ways in each of these. But this is what you do as part of your task stream requirements. And you can find this by what you write in task 5, and it's just a matter of copying and pasting. Some of these you may not address because you didn't engage for whatever reason in your activities within the APSL. I dare say you're definitely going to be communication as well. And I'm seeing if I can look for whatever reason, and I'm not going to get into great detail, but you might not have demonstrated the competency of sensitivity in the APSL, and that's okay. Just put not met. This isn't a grade. This is just a self-assessment on what you did in the APSL and how you address the competencies that you addressed. And you can pull all that from task 5, just copy and paste it over from task 5. What I'll do is I'll go through here and I'll look at the evidence that you presented and the rubrics that presented as well, and based on my opinion on what I've seen of your work and everything, that I'm going to put met or not met. But at the end of the day, if you complete this self-assessment, you have met this requirement. And I'm going to move back here. I may have to come in another way. Yeah, let's go back here. Okay. But if you take that competency analysis and you copy and paste over from task 5 into each of those categories, then you will have done this competency analysis. Same thing with the school of ed disposition, and that's just a self-assessment or assessment that you can just answer. Don't have to copy or paste anything or write anything. It's just a look if you're at your ed dispositions to be a leader, and where do you think you fall at this point in time. You know, like I said, you're just beginning this program. You've not been a school administrator. You are just engaging now for the first time these competencies and the school administrative, you know, content and context and practice. So you're, you know, and just starting out, consider this as teaching as a pre-assessment. Those are the standards. Have each of those standards been taught? Well, not that all 21st standards have been taught. So this is a pre-assessment and which one of these standards have you learned from, and can you show evidence that you haven't learned enough? What we were talking about earlier today in some professional development that I did is what does a student know and can do? So what must you know and what must you can do? And this is showing where you're at. And this kind of a pre-assessment of where you're at, or a formative assessment of where you are at this point in time after the course content. I guess you would consider the competency analysis maybe a formative assessment at this point in time on the standards that were taught or engaged up to this point. What evidence you've shown that you learned those standards or demonstrated those competencies as you engage, as you went through the APSL. School of ed disposition is probably be considered a pre-assessment of those leadership dispositions and where you're at with them right now. And then as you move through the program, maybe a formative assessment, a formative check on the dispositions, and then 605 would be a summative. By this 605, you will have shown and demonstrated evidence of competencies at several different intervals for each competency, at least 3 times for each competency by the end of the program, showing that you indeed have evidence that you possess those competencies and should be a candidate for licensure. All right, so let's get back. So you complete task 5, and you complete task 5 by addressing each of those competencies and reflecting on how you did that within the APSL. Once you get all of task 5 done, you submit it here for evaluation. Then you go up to the competency analysis and you copy and paste over from task 5 the ones that are applicable here, and then you go and do the pre-assessment, self-assessment of the School of Ed dispositions, and then you are done for this section. So that's where you're at right there. Now, the only other thing that you need to do in TaskStream is that you need to go up and access your competency folio. Your competency folio, we've talked about this before, but your competency folio is up here in the banner. You click on that. You click on your competency folio that you created. You should have already created one. Your clinical coach 1 should have helped you. If they didn't get out for whatever reason because of the weather, Dr. Lamb posted and I posted and put it in the video library how to create your competency folio kind of webinar session. But if you look here, here are the 21 competencies of leadership. These are the 21 standards that a principal must possess to be a school administrator in the state of North Carolina. From the leadership competency of communication, all the way down to the leadership competency of being a visionary. Do not worry about the orientation form, the digital learning competency, professional dispositions at this point. Please remember, this is an old version of this competency folio that I just keep for demonstration purposes only. But as you click on each of these competencies, and we'll check with communication, as you click on each of these competencies, it'll tell you what evidence that you will find this in. And there is another form that I talked about that Dr. Church has also referenced, and that's in your materials and content that shows this as well. But artifact 1 is the APSL. So you go back and you look, as with task 5 was a narrative of how you address those competencies. That's what you write about, how you engage those competencies, and then you copy and paste that into your competency analysis in the other section that I just showed you. The competency folio, this is where you copy and paste the artifacts that you presented in your narrative, the artifacts that you presented in your narrative. You reuse and recycle those for your competency folio. So the narrative that you wrote, your task 5, and each evidence, the ABSL, the APTL, all the way down, I'll have a task 5 where you write reflections on those competencies. So the narrative, you recycle that into your competency analysis that we just looked at prior to this page. Your authentic documentation, your artifacts, you recycle those from the APSL into your competency folio. And all you do is you can do a screenshot or the documentation or the pic, text or image or a screenshot of whatever, or a video or an attachment. You just upload those into each of those. So for communication, the first thing that I can think of in the APSL is communicating to the principal that you want to create a PLC and getting permission. The second thing that I can think in the APSL would be communicating to your PLC team about joining the PLC or about coming to the meeting. Or could be a PowerPoint where you communicated to them what the findings were or what research said about performing in professional learning communities, or about what the findings of the comprehensive needs assessment was. But that's evidence of communication, not a narrative, but the artifacts, the things that you put into your in your appendix, the figures, the graphs, the charts. You just copy and paste those over here, and each of these list which evidence that you will best, which would be a good example of finding that communication, and it can be throughout. This is flexible, even though artifact 2, which would be the APTL, is not specifically listed that here. You can still show evidence of communication and some of the things that you did in artifact 2. Also, each one of these offers an open-ended. So that's kind of a wild card. You can play that whenever you want to. You may present to a parent committee. You may conduct a EBOS training. You may go to present to the Board of Education. All those would be good examples of some of these different competencies, and you could use that example as one of your open-ended examples. So communication, actually the first four, I believe, you are connected to the APSL. Communication, change management, yep, they're number one, which is considered the APTL. Number two is the APTEL, which we'll be doing in 602. But the APSL, conflict management, there you'll be doing, you did things in the APSL that shows conflict management, creative thinking, customer focus. You'll find some opportunities in Artifact 3, which I think is the Organizational Management Analysis, OMA, and 4, I just can't think of it off the top of my head, but 3 and 4 there. Delegation, go back at delegation, you can show the APSL, what you did in the APSL there. So that's your competency folio. And after you've done all that, you're done with 601 and ready for 602. So let's review real quickly. Okay, the first thing that we talked about is in your clinical shell, how I want you to submit a task for review, get feedback, revise, and submit it to Dropbox before you submit the next task. Why? Because you may make some changes in task 1 in your revisions that will cause you to make changes in the next task or task 2. It could be 3 and 4, or it could be 2 and 3. I just use that for example. Then we went to the scale handbook and we talked about what is task 5. Task 5 is a reflection of the leadership competencies that you engaged in completing the APSL. And each of those leadership competencies, what did you do? Write a narrative of what you did that it analyzes and reflects and kind of shows representation from your course content as well on each of those competencies. May not be all 21 competencies, just for the nature of what you did in the APSL, but you just address the ones that you did engage in the APSL, and don't worry about the rest. You can even put a small statement there that that you're not engaging in that or not even included. So you do that for task 5. Once you do that, you get your task 5 complete, you submit it to me for review and revision, and once we get it in shape, you put it to the Dropbox for the APSL. Once you get a grade for task 5, then you've got all of these here completed. You take all of these separate segments and you put them into one flowing document, and you submit that document as your final evidence for the APSL, and you get a grade on that. Once you get a grade on that, I will say, okay, you are ready to submit this to TaskStream for evaluation. At that point in time, you go to TaskStream, and you're part of the TaskStream that looks like this right here. You submit that you submit that APSL for evaluation. As you're waiting on feedback or an evaluation on the APSL, you can go in and complete your competency analysis, and that's just a matter of copying and pasting from task 5 in the APSL here, and then you complete the School of Ed disposition. Just a matter of responding to the prompts. Once you've done all that, or you can really do it in any order that you want to, as long as you all get it done by the end of the semester. But you go to your competency folio, and as the competency analysis is where you recycle your narrative. The competency folio is where you recycle your artifacts such as your agendas, your minutes, video clip if you conduct in the PLC, things of that nature. You copy and paste those here. And and that is for each of the ones, for each of the competencies that are applicable to the APSL, which here is considered artifact 1. So guys, that's really going to take you to the end of the semester. As I've said before, take notes as you watch this and kind of indicate the minutes into the presentation. So when you go back and review it, if you're looking for something specific that I said or showed on the screen, then you can, as you look for something specific or that I showed on the screen, then you can look at the minute where it comes up in the presentation and just fast forward to that so you don't have to watch the whole thing over. Give me questions if you have questions. I'll be happy to do a Zoom session with you individually or with your peer group if that's what you need. So just let me know. Once again, I'm sorry that this can't be real time, but I'm sure and I appreciate your understanding on that. I hope and pray that you have a good evening, and we will see you next time.